Thanks, Seb. Good morning, Church whānau. Happy Mother's Day. Whenever me and my mum plan to do something together, like go out for dinner or go to the hot pools or watch the latest episode of whatever show it is that we're currently watching, whenever we're making these plans, my mother will inevitably say, "Ooh, you can tell me all your secrets." And I always reply, "Oh, Mother, I don't have any secrets." But today, I do have a secret. And since it's Mother's Day, I thought that I would tell my mama a secret. And since you're all here, you get to hear it as well. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to hear my secret? Are you listening, Mama? Does someone actually want to go and sit beside my mum? Guys, come on, she raised me. That's no easy task. No one should sit alone on Mother's Day. All right, my secret is. My secret is that there is a part of me that feels wholly insecure and unworthy about sharing this morning. Now, there are two reasons for that. You have to repeat, your mum missed it. You missed it, Mum. I'll tell you what, you lead someone to water. The secret is that I'm feeling insecure about preaching today. Okay. Now, there are two reasons for that. Now, most of you will know that I am not a mum. I am yet to bring Anna Jr. into the world. Now, don't get me wrong, I do actually have what I would consider a front row seat to motherhood, as my friends and sisters have embarked on this journey of becoming a parent. I have been to the hospital and held newborns and fallen completely in love. I have prayed for babies before they've been conceived and for their safety during pregnancy. I have seen and felt the grief of miscarriage. I have seen a yearning for children triggered by baby clothes. I've dropped off food to Niku. I've laughed at stories of my sister throwing up along the Auckland motorway because of morning sickness. I have seen the tears that have come because clothes don't fit anymore. I've seen the sacrifices being made in careers. I've witnessed exhaustion. I have celebrated recently first teeth. My heart has been wrecked when my nieces tell me that they love me. I have made elaborate Easter egg hunts. I have done loads of babysitting and loved it. Glenn's going to put a photo up. I don't know if you managed to do that, Glenn. I have hopped onto the top of a watery bouncy castle when my niece got stuck at the top in my clothes and helped her down. I have navigated prams down beaches, done sleepovers, and I have pondered why on earth nappy companies don't put front and back on the nappies. So that those of us who don't do it with regularity know what way it is supposed to go. I am very proud of my nieces, and those of you who know me will know that I try really hard to be very intentional, and the kind of Nanti Nana that my nieces and nephew soon will know is always there for them. And on this day, traditionally, we have had, but I am not a biological mum. And on this day, traditionally, we have esteemed and respected mums coming and sharing about their journeys of parenting. But that's not something that I am in a position to talk about. And the other reason that I've been feeling a bit insecure about today's preach is that hopefully you will not remember that we have been making our way through a series about what it means to be set apart. We've had talks on our calling to live lives that are holy because God is holy. We've had talks on grace, and that while our grace is defining and it changes our life, it is not a license to sin. Seb did a sensational talk last week on the call to deny ourselves and take up our cross. And as an eldership, we felt to keep pressing into this theme and to keep pursuing it while also acknowledging Mother's Day. Because how we see and raise our children, whether they are biologically ours or not, is one of the ways that we are called to be set apart from society. But again, how am I qualified to talk on teaching kiddos about God? I'm not. So now one of the great mistakes I think you can make as a preacher is to talk about how unqualified you are during your preach. So by sharing those insecurities with you this morning, I have truly broken my own rule. But I wanted to share them with you this morning to tell you my secret. To explain and give context about why I'm about to take the route that I am. I am not going to give you a 3-point sermon on how to be a smashing parent that raises set-apart kids, because I'm not qualified to do that. But what I am going to do with you is share a story from the Bible that introduces some really awesome women. And as I share this story in detail, I am going to make some observations, but my real hope is that as we walk through this story together, that the Spirit will stir within your souls and encourage you in the areas where you need encouragement. That the word of the Lord this morning will do the work. That He will make the points and the truths that you need to hear loud and clear for you, no matter where you're at in your season. So one of the things that I love about the story that I'm about to share is that it doesn't just talk about the role of the biological mum, but it talks about a range of different women in a range of different roles and how each of them had a crucial role, not just in the survival of a baby, but in that baby walking into its calling. So if you are a mum today, this is a story for you. But if you are someone who doesn't yet have kids and wants them or couldn't have them, it's also a story for you. If you are an auntie like me, it is a story for you. If you are a sister or anyone who has any kind of impact or interaction or desire to raise kids and be their champion, this is a story for you. And 3 weeks ago, I actually unconsciously, the Lord knew what He was doing, laid the foundation for this story by leading me to share from Leviticus, a book whose context is Moses rescuing the Israelites from slavery and receiving the law to be followed, to be set apart as God's holy people. Does anyone remember that? Great. Okay. And today's story is actually Moses' story. And it invites us to meet the women who each played a role in getting him to the point where he could lead a nation to be set apart for God. So, without further ado, if you have your Bibles with you, in paper or phone form, please join me in Exodus 1. Now, the name Exodus translates to mean a road or a journey out. And it starts like this, in verse 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. There was Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful, and they increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are getting too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, They set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Plan backfired. And the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians, they were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and they made their lives bitter with hard service, in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. And all their work they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as a midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, you shall live. But the midwives, they feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife even comes. Now, only a man would believe that, right? So God dealt well with the midwives. And the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. So let's park here and reflect on our first woman characters, these midwives. These two women were bold. And there are two things that personally, as an auntie, strike me about them as we read this narrative. And the first of these is that it says that the midwives feared God. Verse 17, but the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. Now, perhaps the term fear of God is circling around Christendom a bit more at the moment because Brooke Liggett has recently released a song literally called The Fear of God. And it circles through the Bible as well, especially by authors in the Psalms and in the Proverbs. In Psalm 19:9, it says, for example, the fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. In Psalm 111:10, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. His praises endure forever. In Proverbs 1:7, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. In Proverbs 3:7, it says, be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. In Proverbs 28:14, it says, blessed is the one who fears the Lord always, but whoever hardens his heart will fall into calamity. So this begs the question, what does it mean to really fear the Lord? When thinking about these midwives, it doesn't mean that they were genuinely afraid and fearful of God. And this is commonly how we can think about fear, right? This is how society thinks about fear. We think about trembling and terror and being genuinely afraid. And absolutely, having a healthy revelation of God's power and sovereignty is not to be disregarded. But the term fear of God means so much more than that. Yireh Adonai is the Hebrew, and it means, capture this, church, it means awe, respect, reverence, worship. When the author is describing the midwife's fear of the Lord, he is making a note of these women's awe and respect and reverence and worship for God. He's making note of these women's grounding in the presence of God, their profound knowledge of and love for him and his teachings, and their deep respect for him. It is the awe of God that is the beginning of wisdom, according to the psalmist. It is the awe of God that is the beginning of knowledge, according to the Proverbs, and can help us turn away from evil, as exhibited by our midwives. In Job 1, when God and Satan are talking about Job in that famous interchange, they are discussing whether or not Job truly fears God. And Satan argues Job fears God and lives in awe and worship because he is blessed. But throughout that narrative, it is Job's fear of God that grounds him. In Nehemiah, it is his fear of the Lord and his awe of him that prompted him not to take silver from already burdened people while rebuilding the wall. And it is the fear of the Lord, the awe, the reverence and worship of Yahweh that fills these midwives and motivates them to disobey Pharaoh's instruction to kill all the baby boys that they deliver, an action that literally could have cost them their lives. These women know who God is, and it is this assurance that grounds them. They know that their God is greater than Pharaoh. They stand in awe of the power of the God of the universe, not the man before them who's trying to be a God in his own way. They desire to follow the instructions and the commandments of the one true king, not the Egyptian in front of them. They serve the Yahweh who knows each and every single one of his children by name, not the one bringing evil by murdering them. They know goodness, and they hate evil. And theologians, fun fact for you, they draw a lot of parallels between the Garden of Eden and Exodus. The plagues, for example, they mirror the days of creation. And Pharaoh, this king of Egypt, is acknowledged to be the new serpent-like figure, existing with shrewdness and craftiness, and with the intention of gathering power and bringing death. But these midwives are not like Eve. They know and are in awe of God, and instead they deceive and trick the serpent. It's a very cool, powerful plot twist. Are you getting that? The other thing I think is worth noting here about these midwives is that their names are stated. As we read through the rest of the coming chapter, you'll note that Moses' biological mum, his sister, and Pharaoh's daughter are referred to by their titles, not by their names. But these two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, get called by name by the author early. For some reason, the author felt to name them in the narrative at this point in time. Now, while we will never know intention for sure, my personal opinion and what I like is that the meaning of these ladies' names is somewhat a clue, and is very cool regardless. See, Shiphrah means beautiful, and Puah means radiant and splendid light. Together, the names of these Hebrew midwives are beautiful, radiant, and splendid light. Think about the meaning of that in this context. Here in Egypt, the Israelites lives are made bitter because of their oppression and slavery. They who were once treated well in this land are ruthlessly treated by this new Pharaoh, who was becoming increasingly paranoid and insecure about their numbers. Darkness and death has descended on them in this foreign land, and inevitably, hit after hit, they were weary and heavy laden, as a people, especially if news had reached them that Pharaoh now intended and had asked their midwives to kill their baby boys. But in this context, in this darkness, these two women carried hope, not just in their names, but in their actions as well. These ladies and their fear of the Lord bring beautiful light to darkness, just as Jesus brings light to our darkness. Here in the book, titled The Journey Out, at the very first turn, we meet two women who know and have an awe for and revelation of God, who carry the name of and call of being beautiful, radiant lights, and whose actions play a vital role not just in Moses' story, but in the nation's history, and God blesses them. Oh my God, cool. So what we might do is we might park. I want you to turn to the person next to you. And I just want you to share for like 1 or 2 minutes while I have a drink. What strikes out to you? You might have picked up something else in the first part of this narrative. What sticks out to you about these midwives? Go. Alrighty, we shall return. So picking up our narrative now in chapter 1, verse 22, it's time to meet another lady. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, "Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live." Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman, and the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and dabbed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Moses' mum, biological, and sister have entered the narrative. And what incredible faith they display. Moses' biological mum is pregnant. Now, as a society, for the most part, we celebrate pregnancy, right? When a baby is on the way, it is exciting. There are sometimes staged and thought out social media posts announcing the news. There are gender reveal parties, baby showers, there are pregnancy photo shoots, and of course, all of the preparations that parents go through to get their homes ready for their new arrival. It is a time of anticipation and building excitement. Would you agree? Yeah. But for Moses' mum, her anticipation would be very different. She would have spent her pregnancy wondering if this baby of hers, growing in her tummy, was a boy or a girl, and having building anxiety about whether she would have to see her baby thrown into the Nile, as per Pharaoh's edict. She likely had witnessed or heard about women in her community weeping as their babies were taken away and thrown into the waters. Can you imagine living with such a weight? And then giving birth to discover that indeed, after 9 months of anxiety and nerves, it was in fact a boy who the story says she sees that he is fine and good. Now, all the mothers that I've seen think that their babies are cute and good. And apparently, commentators and theologians, they discuss why this detail about Moses' mum looking at him and seeing him as a fine child is even mentioned, because surely it's like a given, right? But the theory I like the most is that, again, we have a subtle reference back to creation in Eden. God says that his creation is good, does he not? And knowing that all things that God creates are good, Moses' mum sees her son as a creation of God's and sees that he is good and knows that throwing him into the Nile to destroy him as per Pharaoh's edict would be horrible. So she doesn't. Now, how she manages to hide a newborn for 3 months is astounding. Glenn's going to put up another photo. Hopefully, all going well. No. That one. There we go. So this photo captured this week on whānau night. This is my niece, Afi. And she is turning the big 1 next month. So she's a bit older than Moses was in our narrative, okay? And but she's going through this stage at the moment, bless her, where she squeals when she's really happy or when she wants attention. Now, this miracle girl is so stunning. She's got the most beautiful grin, guys, most beautiful smile. She's so friendly and happy. But boy, does her squealing put you on alert. It is high-pitched, and there is absolutely no way that we could have hid Afi for 3 months. But this savvy mum finds a way to hide her son for 3 months, and then she takes a step of faith. Verse 3 says, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and dabs it with bitumen and pitch. Significantly, the Hebrew word used to describe this vessel that she puts him in is tabar, which is only used in one other place in the Hebrew Bible. Would someone like to guess where? Noah's Ark. There we go. In Genesis 6, where God tells Noah to build a tabar and cover it in pitch to make an ark. Moses' mother literally builds a mini ark. She puts her baby in it and she takes him to the water and places him in the reeds. Now dwell in this scene with me, because the narrative really kind of skates past this in like one line, and it can be really easy for us just to blaze through and miss the heaviness and the weight of what's actually going on. But imagine this mum walking to the edge of the Nile, carrying her son in a basket, and the dread and the sadness and the grief that she could well be about to launch her precious son to his death. Now, a quick Google search reveals what Moses' mum probably already knew as she walked to the water's edge. Not only did Egyptians live all along the edge of the Nile, and any one of them seeing this basket and discovering Moses could have killed him, but there were also threats under the water to Moses' life. Now you can do this image, Glenn. So, for example, did you know that the Nile River is home to the African tigerfish, whose fish look like that, whose teeth look like that? There are river snakes. There are hippos. And the second biggest reptile in the world takes up residence in the Nile crocodile, who are apparently feared for their aggressive nature and high speeds in the water. Suffice to say, a meal in a basket totaling across the water would probably have been considered the equivalent of Uber Eats for the underwater life. And ultimately, this mum, put a better photo on now, Nev. Put any one of the nieces. This photo, Nev, Glenn, golly. This mum had no idea when she put him into the water what would happen to him. What an incredible act of faith and trust it was. I can't imagine putting any of my nieces into a basket and pushing her off into the largest river in the world, with these threats to her life, both on the side of the water and under the water. But in an act of faith and radical hope of things not yet seen, Moses' mum does it. And little does she know that just as God brought Noah through the waters of death in an ark to save a nation, so he also has a plan to bring Moses through the waters of death in a mini ark to save a nation. It's all very symbolic. God's hand and sovereignty is evident. Yet again, God has a plan to save, and it starts with this mama walking to the water, putting her fine child into a basket and pushing him off. And then she asks her daughter to watch to see what happens. Now, as previously mentioned, we don't know her name yet in this part of the book. And Moses isn't named either. Now, this could well be a technique by the author to highlight that this mum was like hiding. You know, she's tiptoeing with her baby around the law. They were hiding and trying to escape the state's edict, trying to keep a low profile so that the boy would have a chance of society. It could be a written technique. But late on Friday night, as I was typing up these notes, I found myself wondering, I wonder what Jochebed, which is her name, means. So again, I hopped on Google, and I thought that this was worth sharing. And apparently, even though I acknowledge that Google is not the reliable source and should not be used widely in sermon prep, I thought that this was cool. Moses' mum, Jochebed, her name means glory of God. And just like the midwives, doesn't she live in the calling of her name? Her actions, her trust and faith as a mum, not only allowed God to work, but bring him glory. Picking up our narrative, in verse 5 of chapter 2, we read, "Now, the daughter of Pharaoh came to bathe at the river. While her young woman walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and again said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?' And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go.' So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away, nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages.' So the woman took the child and nursed him. And when the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, 'I drew him out of the water.'" Our third woman, one of the most unlikely helpers, enters our story to play a vital role. To recap, we've had Hebrew midwives, beautiful radiant lights who feared God and whose awe and revelation of him grounded them and motivated their actions. We've had a Hebrew biological mum who loves her son and whose faith in things not yet seen brings her to the water edge with a mini ark and starts off this chain of events whereby God will be brought glory. And now, in a turn of unexpected events, we have an Egyptian woman entering our narrative who becomes an adoptive mum. This is a real plot twist because not only is she an Egyptian, but she is an Egyptian from the household of the very man whose command our previous two women are defying. When Moses' sister sees the basket being noticed by Pharaoh's daughter and is picked up by her servant, the nerves would have been rife. What will this Egyptian do when she sees this child? And the narrative, it really kind of slows down. And it takes us into much more detail as the author recounts this story blow by blow in much more detail than previously. But God is at work. This woman, no doubt, knowing the orders of her father and identifying this baby as a Hebrew, takes pity on him. This woman is moved by compassion, and this compassion motivated her to act extraordinarily and in a history-defining way. Not only does she spare his life against her father's command, but she literally pays for his nursing. And then She adopts this boy as her own. She is the one who names him. We've already had midwives defy Pharaoh. We've had Moses' biological mother defies Pharaoh. But now Pharaoh's own daughter is defying him as well and rejecting evil. And this is not just like a little bit defiant by letting him live and then pushing him back into the river, right? This woman brings this boy into her household to be hers, to become her son. And I think that that is wild. That the compassion of this woman leads her to act in a way that to her people would have seemed crazy. But she gives this boy a royal start. And what is also so powerfully and symbolically delightful is also how Pharaoh's daughter says the words that the future Pharaoh is simply unable to. And this word is used a lot in the Exodus book and in this journey out. Did anyone pick it up? What does she say? Oh, very good. Yes, very good. She says, go. Upon seeing Pharaoh's daughter interact with her brother, Moses' sister approaches Pharaoh's daughter and asks permission to go, to call a nurse and take the baby away. Shall I go? Miriam says. And this seeking permission to go, is according to scholars the exact same word and phrasing that this baby Moses, in approximately 80 years, will say to the future Pharaoh when he asks permission to go and take the Israelites to worship in the wilderness. Where Miriam, a Hebrew, asks Pharaoh's daughter to go and take the child away, so will Moses one day ask Pharaoh to take the Hebrews away in an adaptation of this permission-asking process. Let my people go, we will hear time and time and time again. But the major difference is, what's the major difference? She says go. That's right. Future Pharaoh says no time and time again to the death and detriment of many and will not give permission to go. But this female member of his household says yes and does so immediately. She says yes to this Hebrew girl who asked permission to go and find a nurse for this Hebrew baby that she just found in a basket that's not even biologically hers. She offers to pay for the nurse and adopts this child as her own. And through her compassion, she establishes herself as this countercultural Egyptian who not only goes against the mandates of her father, but welcomes into her home this child of a nation that the Egyptians feared. She uses her privilege to save a life. She could have said, what difference would it make to save one when there are hundreds in danger? Logical thought pathway, right? We encounter that in fundraising. What does it matter to help the one? But she chose to do what she can, and that one grew up to deliver the rest of the nation. A theologian in Exodus, she says, this is one of the most ironic reversals in human history, whereby the mum who has had to hide her child for fear of his murder by Pharaoh's men is now paid by Pharaoh's woman to nurse him through his infancy, and is told by Pharaoh's daughter to make him go. Through all these women, God is echoing at things to come. This fine baby boy who was born into slavery, who travels through water, and whose life was spared through the actions of midwives, his mama and his adoptive mum, will one day lead the nation through the waters and out of his oppression. His story becomes Israel's story, and these women collectively are a vital part of it. Are you inspired by that? Ben, want to come up? So, whether you are a biological mum, an adoptive mum, a sister, you might actually be a midwife, or any kind of female who wants any kind or has any kind of role in raising up kiddos. I hope you've been encouraged by this story today. We've met 4 women in particular who each, in their own ways and in their own roles, contributed to the raising of one child who goes on to lead a nation set apart for God. We've met beautiful, radiant lights in the midwives who fear the Lord and whose love and knowledge of God saw them confident to stand up against Pharaoh's edict. We've met a biological mum whose faith and actions bring God glory. We've held our breath while an Egyptian daughter of the Pharaoh sees the Hebrew child and moved by compassion and pity, becomes a counter-cultural woman who raises up a man who will one day lead the Exodus out of Egypt. At every turn, at the start of this journey out of Egypt, we meet a woman who contributed to the raising of a leader and whose actions hint at what God has planned for the future, even though they didn't know it at the time. Remarkably, Moses' rescuers are these women acting at great risk to themselves. Rich and poor, young and old, Egyptian and Hebrew, they band together to do what is right. And I'll finish with one quote from an Exodus-like pro-theologian. And she says this: "These women take their place in the long line of faithful people whose contributions God has honoured. No matter our context or convictions about what is allowed or what is possible, every woman then and now has a sphere of influence that she can leverage. Each of the Exodus women maximised her culturally defined role to flip the tables on injustice. And so,